Hi, welcome to The Witch and the Words. Is the May Queen the same figure as the Virgin Mary? And are both of them mythical figures that are related to an older goddess?
You say take me on a treasure hunt. I long for something new. Have you heard the fairies when they sing and dance? Oh, I wish it was me every night. When I close my eyes, I see trust you when you say that beauty lives in me too.
The May Queen is a traditional figure of English pageantry, and it's not clear exactly how long these traditions have gone on. We do know that the oldest continuous tradition takes place at Hayfield in Derbyshire. Traditionally, the May Queen was a young woman about 11 to 13 years old who was dressed in white and crowned with a headdress of flowers. Sometimes the May Queen would be partnered by a figure who was her consort, who was a man dressed in greenery, and this man was known often as the May King or the King of May. He was also known as the Father of May or the Garland King. He was dressed in foliage which would symbolise the green foliage of the trees at springtime, whereas the May Queen would be dressed in white and wear flowers, and she would symbolise the hawthorn blossom. James Fraser, in his book The Golden Bough, suggested that the May Queen and the May King were traditions that had continued from much older tree worship. However, we could see documentation that makes it clear that the May King did not really come into these ceremonies until the 18th century, and his appearance was based on older traditions from the 16th century, which began as milkmaids that carried milk pails that were decorated with flowers and ribbons. Later these turned into pyramids that were worn on the head as headdresses, and then much later these became mummers' outfits that were traditionally worn by chimney sweeps. And so many people have disputed James Fraser's older tree tradition theory on the basis that it is well documented that the Green Man was not really a part of the May Day celebrations until around about 1770. However, we can see that there are many fertility rites and customs in the celebration of May Day and in the union of the May Queen and the May King. So these fertility traditions are undeniable. So although we only have late historical records of the May King and no ideas as to when the first May Queen was crowned, it is still possible to suggest that there is a connection between these figures and earlier characters of mythic importance. Now, the Green Man is very often associated with Robin Hood, and Robin Hood, controversially, could either have been a mythical or a very real figure. And historical legends of him have been told from around about the 13th century. Whether he was a historical man or not, his tales grew into legends, and Maid Marian became a later addition to the Robin Hood myth around about the 1600s. However, Maid Marian was already a very strong figure of the May Day celebrations, and she was known as Marian of the May. There is some evidence that Robin Hood was in fact a real man, a real figure. And this comes from an antiquarian of the 19th century named Joseph Hunter, who found in the archives preserved in the Exchequer in London that there was record of a yeoman who was called Robin Hood from Wakefield in Yorkshire, who went into exile in the Forest of Barnsdale after the Battle of Boroughbridge in 1322. He was rejoined in the woods by his wife, who was called Matilda, and it was said that at this time she took on the name of Marian. This is exactly the story that is told in the play The Downfall of Robert the Earl of Huntingdon, which was written in 1598 by Anthony Mundy. According to this play, Matilda or Marian had a cousin who was called Elizabeth de Stainton, and she was the prioress of Kirklees Priory near Brighouse in Yorkshire. Joseph Hunter found in the records that the Matilda who joined Robin Hood in Barndale Forest also had a cousin who was called Elizabeth de Stainton, and that she was also the prioress of Kirklees Priory. So with this evidence, it may not be unreasonable to presume that the Lord and the Lady of the Green Woods became figures that were actually based on the historical legends of two actual personages, that of Marian and Robin, the outlaws who entered Barndale Forest in around the 14th century. And that this figure of Marian of the May was in fact a later addition to their legends as their legends grew more in mythic proportion. Other identities that she often takes in the Robin Hood tales is that of Marian Fitzwalter, and it has been suggested that this character is based on the real figure of Matilda, the daughter of Baron Fitzwalter, who actually tried to assassinate the evil King John and had to go into exile. And so many stories seem to combine that may have historical basis and may be blended with myth. Now, in some early tellings of the tale, Robin is actually a shepherd, and he is given a consort of a shepherdess called Clorinda. And these tales were told around about 1283, and in some of these tales, which were French in origin, the character was also given the name of Ryder. And so we can trace these tales well back into the 13th century. So writing in 1500, Alexander Berkeley refers to some merry fight of Maid Marian or else of Robin Hood. And it is Marian who is associated with May Day after Robin Hood had faded from the traditional role of the Green Man, to be replaced again at some point in the 18th century. Jim Lees, author of The Quest for Robin Hood, suggests that Maid Marian was another name for the Virgin Mary, and that in these plays and in these tales, Maid Marian was the Virgin Mary personified. But in most of these tales, Maid Marian is far from a docile, meek or heavenly lady. In fact, tales are told of how she is dressed in men's clothes, how she is quite tomboyish, and how she fights and scuffles in the woods and actually bests Robin Hood himself in a fight. So she is as free in heart as Robin is himself. So this identification with the Virgin Mary is a somewhat loose identification if she is in fact quite a bawdy figure. Although Marian and Mary may in fact be mythical personifications of an older tradition and of a much older goddess, and this goddess may in fact be the Greek goddess Maya, who we know today as pagans better as Gaia, and which was the Roman name for this Greek mythic goddess Maya. In fact, the month of May, which in Latin is Maius, may in fact take its name from this Greek goddess of Maya. The etymology of Maya actually shares a meaning with the term Maius or Mayor, which we know today as meaning major, which has some connotation with the meaning of growth. It is also an honorific term for an older woman of mater, which has the meaning of mother and also has some meaning of midwife. She's also a foster mother of Callista's son, Arcas, and she was born in Arcadia. Now Hera turns Callista into a bear in a fit of jealousy, and so the term male may actually have some star law association and be associated with the constellations of Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. She was also known as the oldest of the seven Pleiades, and the Pleiades were born to Atlas and Pleione, the Oceanid. And the Pleiades were sometimes known as the mountain nymphs, or the Oreads. And in one song she is known as Mountain Maya of the beautiful black eyes. Maya embodied the concept of growth, and in Roman prayer she is identified explicitly with the goddess Terra Mater, or Tellus Mater as she was known in older tradition. The symbol of Tellus were the cornucopia and flowers and fruits. In such attributes she is also connected to Ceres, as well as to Fauna, to Ops, to Juno, and to Carna or Carda or Cardia as she was known. And they are all known as the Magna Mater, which means the great goddess. This great goddess is also associated with Cybele, who is the great mother goddess of the Anatolians, and it's possible that the Neolithic figures of plump women that have been found in places like Catalhayuk are actually older representations of some of the oldest and earliest forms of this goddess. She was very much an earth goddess associated with fecundity, growth and fertility. Her associations with agriculture were well written about by the Romans, where Tellus Mater was named as one of the 20 principal gods of Rome and one of the 12 agricultural deities. In Etruscan, Juno, one of her many associations is known as Uni, and she is also called Uni May. Etymologists can connect the name of the month of May to the word Maoris, which are the ancestors, meaning those who are greater or those who have come before and are older. And of course May Day was originally one of the two celebrations that were honoured to the ancestors and the dead. Her connection to Hermes, her son, who is also known as Mercury, connects her to Merx or Merkez, or as we know it today as merchandise or goods. And of course Mercury was the god of trade. A May Day fair was a traditional practice of May Day festivals, and I conjecture that this is possibly some reference marking the beginning of old customs relating to meeting, trading and also possibly marriage agreements. Mercury was honoured on his day, which were the Ides of May, around about the 15th of May. So this is possibly the time when trading began again after the long winter. Uni, of course, was a goddess of marriage, fertility, the family and women in Etruscan religion. And Maia was a nurturer who was linked to the great mother goddess. But in the May Day celebrations, the May Queen is in fact a maiden who is dressed in white and crowned with flowers. So what is the connection of this maiden to the mother goddess? Well, immediately you may be thinking of the goddess of Demeter and Persephone. And these earth goddesses have many names. They go by the name of Isis. They also are linked to Hestia, to Pandora, and the Greek goddess Rhea. Now, when we come to Rhea, we find that she is in fact the daughter of Gaia, and she is the daughter of the earth goddess Gaia and the sky god Uranus, who is actually also Gaia's son. So the mother of the gods is related to this daughter who we know better as Persephone, but first let's explore her name as Rhea. Now I am linking this name Rhea to a possible connection to a conjunct name of Ma and Rhea, which I presume may have some connotation to the names of Maria, Mary, Marion and the Celtic goddess Rhiannon, and she is the daughter of the mother goddess and an earth goddess in her own right. So in many ways this story is similar to the earth goddess of Demeter and her daughter Persephone, or Cori as she was better named. And the name Cori is a euphemism that means maiden. And the reason for this was that it was taboo to speak the name of Persephone. This was because she was an underworld goddess. She was the goddess of death, and she was a chthonic being. And so often she was not spoken about in any ways but euphemistically. And so she went by many names such as the Maiden, but also as the Pure One, the White One, the Pale One, or the Fair One. Now she is the goddess of spring, and her role was very important in the Eleusinian mysteries. In Rome she was known as Proserpine, and Proserpine means something such as she who shoots forth. But she was known as many names, even in Greece. Her her name Persephone has so many variations that it was conjectured that it was a much older name, and that there was some confusion in translation that had meant that it was even difficult for the Greeks to pronounce, and therefore it had so many different variations all along similar lines. So we know her today better as Persephone. But as we know, she is the maiden who is stolen into the underworld, and the world becomes unfertile. And then she is rescued again by her mother and brought back to the surface, and at this the world again becomes fertile. Now in Greece, this myth took place in autumn, as Greece is incredibly hot during the summer. And so it's in the summer months that things die off and the vegetation struggles, and it's only when things cool down in the autumn that it's possible to harvest the grain. And of course, Persephone is a grain goddess. Now, I will conjecture that we actually know her very well in our own myths and legends, and that she is in fact the same figure as Snow White. So if you look at the origin of Snow White in Wikipedia, you'll find some stories about how this may be related to a historical countess or some other real figure who was killed through jealousy, or wanted to become the wife of a prince. Many tales are out there, but I will propose that this story is far, far older and tells the story of the spring maiden who awakens from a deathless sleep in her glass coffin back to life with the return of spring. So among the many names of the May Queen, I will propose that she is also known as Snow White. In many versions of Snow White across Europe and the world, there are many, many names for her. In fact, a sad fact is that you can no longer use the name of Snow White in any media, as it has now been copyrighted by the evil Disney Empire, by the Disney Empire in 2013. So many other names of Snow White are Marietta, Magranetta and Marigo. And even in the Gaelic story of the Gold and Silver Tree, her name has some connotation meaning the flame of branches, which is a euphemism that is very similar to Persephone, that means bright or fair-haired or grains of wheat. The jealous crone tries to defeat this goddess, but she survives and comes back to life and is eventually crowned queen. So this is the real story of the May Queen, and one that goes back many thousands of years. I thank those who are keeping this tradition alive, even though in Edinburgh this year, the traditional Beltane festival, the one that I have slight bones about because everybody is painted red, which has no bearing on tradition at all, the Green Man this year will actually be played by a woman, and the reason for this is that the loving God needs to be represented by a woman for some reason, in the name of equality. Please write your own comments about that in the box below. But anyway, yes, the tradition is being kept in some way, but our ancestors held great significance in these stories and sacred rites, including the marriage of the Green Man and the Green Woman, returning the fertility to the pregnant land. These sacred rites were a great part of the Eleusinian mysteries, of which we know very little, except that those who took part of them were said to be promised to enter a land of perpetual beauty after death. So the green man and the green woman are the union of the goddess and the god at Beltane, a marriage that brings about the fertility of the earth. And we may have known them by many names, but their traditions, I would say, are as old as civilization itself. So I thank you. I hope you have got something from this talk and that it's given you something to think about. If you've got anything to add or any comments on what I've said, please discuss them in the box below. It's quite nice to have some discussion amongst people. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all your likes and subscribes, and thank you to my new subscribers. And I wish you a very merry Beltane. All the peace and blessings and fertility of the earth to come your way, and I hope to speak to you all again soon. Thank you. Goodbye.